one of the epiphanies for me in the last very recent year or two has been looking at my coping mechanisms very differently. And what I mean by that is for a very long time, I had certain behaviors, certain defaults that I hated, which of course means I'm hating a part of myself.
That's right.
And that included anger, rage responses, use of stimulants, you name it. A close friend of mine who is a therapist, but I've never engaged him as a therapist. And there are certainly plenty of bad therapists out there, which I think is a separate topic. Nonetheless, he was helping, and I'm sure we'll get back to this, but in preparation for a very controlled, supervised psychedelic experience, he was helping another friend of ours prepare.
Is this with MDMA?
This is with ayahuasca.
With ayahuasca, okay.
And this person had a number of addictions. And she hated these addictions. And she said, I hate these. I realize they're terrible. They've ruined my life. They're ruining my life. And it was all a negative relationship to these behaviors. And he said, did these ever serve you? Did these ever help? What did these do for you?
Exactly.
And she described how they helped her cope with very difficult circumstances early on. And he said, perhaps what you should do as an exercise, and what we can do, is for you to effectively thank those behavior for the role they played and for the necessity they filled, and to then recognize, thank them for their duty effectively, but to let them go because they're no longer needed. And that was a huge eye-opener for me. And I began to, this is coinciding with a number of things, and I don't want to take us off the rails, but began to use something called loving kindness meditation, or metta, M-E-T-T-A meditation, which I was introduced to by a gentleman from Google, actually, or formerly Google, Chade Meng Tan, and then also Jack Kornfield, who really reiterated it for me.
Of course.
But I never applied it to myself. I always applied this loving kindness meditation to other people.
To others.
And what was recommended is that I apply that loving kindness to the younger Tim, to the other versions of Tim who had these behaviors that I had grown to hate and resent, and to actually thank them for the role they played. For instance, that rage, that anger was the fuel that got me out of Long Island. And where I grew up, there are a lot of serious drug issues, particularly with opiates. My best friend died of fentanyl. Many of my friends are addicted to opiates who I grew up with. Many have died. And I got out because I was angry. In part, I think that was the fuel, but that fuel ended up over the long term being very corrosive. But in a way, to reconcile myself with that, I had to stop resenting it. And I suppose that's maybe more of a confession than a question, but your comment brought it to mind. And maybe as a segue, I'd just love to hear, and we can take it anywhere we want, of course, but once you have shifted the focus from why the addiction to why the pain, and you start to work with someone, what approaches have you found to help? What tools?
Well, so I very much salute your friend's approach. It's exactly what the approach I would take myself. And I call it compassionate inquiry. So inquire in a compassionate way. Not why did I do this, but why did I do this?
Right.
The first one is not a question, it's a statement, it's a self-condemnation. The second one is a question. Wonder why I did this. It soothed my pain. And so what your friend said, that it served you, so thank it, love it, but let go of it, is absolutely right. I call it the stupid friend. The stupid friend is the one who helped you in a particular way at a certain time, but it can't learn that way doesn't function anymore.
Right.
That instead of helping, now it's hurting. So it's a friend because it's really trying to help, but it's stupid because it's not learning that you're no longer that 3-year-old or that 5-year-old or that 15-year-old, So this leads to the question of trauma, because it's one thing to recognize that all this originates in childhood pain. It's quite another to transform that pain. And for that, we have to understand what trauma is. So people often think that trauma is what happens to you. So trauma is a divorce when you were small and your parents fighting. Trauma is your mother's depression. Trauma is your father's alcoholism. Trauma is your parents' argumentation. Trauma is physical or sexual abuse or some loss. Those aren't the traumas. Those are traumatic. But the trauma is not what happens to you. The trauma is what happens inside you. And as a result of these traumatic events, what happens inside you is you get disconnected from your emotions, and you're disconnected from your body, and you have difficulty being in the present moment, and you develop a negative view of your world, and a negative view of yourself, and a defensive view of other people. And these perspectives keep showing up in your life in the present, because they're the stupid friends. And so the issue is not just to recognize what happened 10, 15, 30, however many years ago, but to actually recognize their manifestations in the present moment and to transcend them. And how do you do that? By reconnecting with yourself, by restoring the connection with your body primarily and with your emotions that you lost. And once you do, when you found these things again, then you have what we call recovery. Because what does it mean to recover something? It means to find it again. So what is it that people find when they recover? They find themselves. And the loss of self is the essence of trauma. So the real purpose of addiction treatment, mental health treatment, any kind of healing is reconnection.